New technology.
Always something new. Can't ever just keep it.
Trying to set up this. I moved back. Bruce asked me to move back, and now I can't see that. So. My notes are on my iPad. And it changed face there.
Dad?
Hi.
Morning?
No, no. Evie.
Okay.
And see, I'm already
I did.
I just lay a big old sheet down in the garage.
He'd be with me otherwise. You know, we don't have CBS. If I want to and then I want to get to the become games, we don't have spend the day tomorrow and watch games.
I'm ready to put garage here.
11:30. And if you guys are napping or whatever, like I just back and forth.
But I can't carry it all on my trailer.
And it'd be fun.
It's too heavy, so that's
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
What's that?
It was one of my best friends.
Okay, it was just
So you can tape it for you.
No.
I
All
know.
right, we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's Karen's. It's always Karen's.
I know.
Y'all know?
I'm always, yeah. It's a
All
hard,
right.
I married into it, what can I say?
Yeah, you married into those hard rocks. All right, so tonight we're in John chapter 4. We're looking at the woman at the well. So Jesus says to her, as she's there drawing water, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. Ah! See? That's why I hate text.
That's quite a situation.
Alright, so this lady would make the #1 list in discrimination. Alright, so we've been doing this stuff about through the eyes of the locals. And again, remember, everything was done in that climate early in the morning or late in the evening, so you have shade and cool. And so the women would take advantage of it. They'd all go to the well, which this well is outside of the city. It's Jacob's well. It's out a little ways away. They all would go there. There would have been a covering on it, so they'd sit there, they'd help each other draw water, and they'd have their morning discussions, and then head back to town. The problem was, it's the middle of the day. And why have we said in the past that this woman was drawing water in the middle of the day by herself?
All the men had to get their stuff done before.
No.
Oh,
No.
Because of her reputation.
because of her reputation, yeah.
On top of that,
Yeah. Her reputation was so bad, so she had to, she just didn't feel, either she didn't feel welcome by the ladies, or else she wasn't welcome.
The women usually gathered the water early in the day when it was cool.
That's right.
And they would snub her or make comments or belittle her in some way.
Oh, yes.
So she had to wait till they were gone.
Yeah, she just, even if it was just in her mind, we've all been there where we think people are talking about us, and the old game we used to play, school and campus, you look at somebody and act like you're whispering, and, you know, drive them crazy. I saw a hand, how?
Well, that, I think when she starts to talk to Jesus, as she says, why are you talking to me? And that kind of shows her mindset is to say, why would you even do this?
So, I mean, we look at her, and we look at her situation. Number one, she's being discriminated against. Number two, she's a Samaritan, which are hated by the Jews. Gender bias, she's a female. She gets talked down to by the men, which was not uncommon in their culture and time, especially for a woman who, in her case, divorced not once, not twice, 5 times. And what did it say about the man she was with now?
Not her husband.
Not your husband. You're living with somebody else's man. You know. So she's got all these things happening. And so when you add it up, this is not the person you would typecast in a movie to be the apostle or the minister of the year. You know. But she is going to become the world's first missionary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't she also part Jewish, Samaritan?
The Samaritan. We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about the whole history of the Samaritan thing, so you understand a little bit. So he doesn't just put her in charge of the class, he puts her in charge of evangelizing a whole town. So before the day's over, she has gone and told the entire city, who've all come out to the well to talk to Jesus. Boy, talking about tough work, he sits down at the edge of the well, says, "Can you give me some water?" Next thing you know, a whole town comes to see me because of what she said. So, you know, have you ever seen like flowers, and we've had a little bit of a drought, and they'll get all wilty and bad, and then just a little bit of water, they stand right back up, they look good again. A little bit of love, if you get nothing else out of this lesson, a little bit of love and kindness can change everything. It doesn't take much, especially kids. Hug, a little, you know, how you doing in school, all can make a huge difference in their lives. And you don't realize it sometimes, but we have the best opportunity to keep kids in school. Because by praising them, by giving them some love, by asking about it, they know that somebody cares. Teachers don't have time, you know, or desire. And like Freeport School, there's not a lot of desire to help them. And a lot of times parents are busy, so, you know, it doesn't take much. So the lineage of Peter, Paul, St. Patrick of Ireland, St. Francis of Assisi can all be traced back to this woman of bad reputation. They really all can. And she was overwhelmed by Christ, so she has to speak out. Not just because of what Jesus did, although that was huge, but because she let him do it. She let him into her life. She let him love her. And that's another thing. You ever notice with our teenagers, they act like they don't want it? It's a lie. They do. Chloe's a good example. Chloe, you know, in the beginning, I always say, but she should have run away from the hugs either. So, you know, the teenagers are like that at camp. Good grief, it's nonstop. Hugs and high fives. And kids want that interaction. This woman wanted that interaction. So, I need some people to read. We need to read John 4, 5 through 30 and John 4, 5 through 30. So we're going to read them both. No. There's a typo, everybody. Quit staring at it like it's going to jump out of
it's
you.
an honor, Joe.
I'm going,
And it's a typo, all right?
reading John 4, 5.
Mike, if you want to do 5 through, say, 16, 17, something like that.
I sure will. John 4, verse 5. Verse 16. Okay. So he came to the city of Samaria called Sychar. Near the parcel of land that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, tired from his journey, was just sitting by the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." For his disciples had gone away to the city to buy food. So the Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, though you are a Jew, are asking me for a drink, though I am a Samaritan woman?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus replied to her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is who is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." She said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket. Well's deep. Where then do you get this living water? You are not greater than our father Jacob, are you, who gave us the well and drank of it himself, and his sons and his cattle?" Jesus answered and said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him shall never be thirsty. But the water that I will give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up to eternal life." And the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, so that I will not be thirsty nor come all the way here to draw water." And he said to her, "Go call your husband and come here."
All right, 17 through 30, somebody.
Okay,
Lady.
Okay, good.
"I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." How far you want me to read?
30.
"Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the Spirit and in truth." The woman said, "I know that the Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, "I am the one speaking to you. I am he." Just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. But no one asked, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" Then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?" They came out of the town and made their way toward him.
All right, so what was her question when he first started talking to her?
"Why would you ask me to draw water?"
So what did she expect him? When she walked up and there's a Jewish man standing there, she goes, she starts to let down thinking of water. What does she expect him to do?
Ignore her.
Exactly. She expects him to ignore. Now, there's a twofold there. One, because he was a Jew, but two, from his disciples' standpoint, remember their question is, or they didn't ask him, but they were thinking, what do you need? Because it would have been the job of the students of the rabbi to take care of his need. The women that were going with him, Mary, and all the other Marys, they're following on, they're cooking and stuff. But if he has a need, it's his disciples' job. It's a student's job to take care of all their master's needs. And so they're both amazed. One, you're talking to this woman. Two, you're talking to a Samaritan. Three, you didn't let us do our job. What's wrong with you? It also shows that Jesus set this up from the beginning, though, because he sent them away to find food. And so here's the question, too. How far did they have to go to get food? Because they're in Samaria. Their food is considered unclean. So what did they do to get food? I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't say that. So anyway, she says Jews don't associate. So a little background. Traditionally, they did not associate because there was a long-standing split between the Jews and the Samaritans over ancestry, over scripture, over the right place to worship, and this turned into political hostility. And then over time, when you hate enough, contempt, you can't stand each other. So, we're going to go back. 722 BC. So we're talking a long time before Christ. The Assyrians had conquered the northern kingdom, and some Israelites remained in the land, and they began to intermarry with the Assyrians, which was forbidden by God, but they did. And those people became known as the Samaritans. The Judeans of the south came to see these northerners that were ethnically mixed and religiously compromised, and they began to see them as not real Jews. And so now all of a sudden you're getting this real divide because you're not Jewish. You can't come to the temple. You can't do anything. Now they're left with, what do we do? How do we worship our God? Because they are Jews. They're mixed race Jews, between Syrian and all. But anyway, so then they have the temple and worship location dispute when the Judean exiles returned from Babylon. Now this is in the 600 BC or 500 BC. They rebuilt the Jerusalem temple. People from Samaria came and said, "We'll help you rebuild the Holy Temple." You want to know what they said?
No.
"We don't need your help. We don't trust your lineage. We don't trust your worship style." And so this rejection here in the 500s marks a bigger turning point, even to more hatred and all that. I'm just going to point out, sometimes we have the same problem. Just a second. We have the same problem, and that is, let's say there's a good work in the community, and we don't want to get involved because other churches are involved that we don't agree with. Listen, I believe what we study. I believe what we teach. I believe what we believe on salvation. But at the same time, Jesus said, if anyone gives a cup of water in my name, I'm not going to forget that. And so something like believing the children, where we're helping, we're doing something, I'm not going to argue if somebody comes to me and they're Catholic, they're Lutheran, they're Baptist, they're whatever. When we're doing something socially good, it doesn't matter. If we're all doing it in the name of God, God gets the glory, regardless. We're not talking about my salvation or theirs. We're talking about doing good. And so that's really important.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting here is her first question is, you Jews say that we should worship in Jerusalem, and we say we should worship here. The first thing she wants to do is to deal with this issue. How many times does that happen to us today, where somebody wants to deal with an issue and we would like, okay, can we deal with a lesser issue first?
Yes, and you taught that. At Hope School we were taught that if you're outreaching somebody, you got them right to where you want them to be. I've never found that to work very well. I believe somebody comes to you, deal with the question at hand. Don't get in so deep that you can never move beyond that. But answer the question. But open the door. Salesmen never ask a question that is a yes or no answer. A good salesman does. A good salesman makes you have to answer it in detail. Yeah, probative answer. So same thing here. Give them probative, the ability to ask a question or answer a question in long words, not in yes or no. Because if that's all you give them, then they're done as soon as they say yes or no. It's over. Anyway, so the Samaritans developed their own priesthood. They built their own temple to the God of Israel on top of Mount Gerizim. They presented it as a true sanctuary instead of Jerusalem, which created more rivalry. Now I will tell you this: on Mount Gerizim, the temple still exists. It's very old, and inside of that temple is a family tree of the priesthood. They have it going all the way back to the days of the Assyrians. They have nearly 3,000 years of their priesthood painted on walls that you can still see. So in their mind, the Jews don't have a priesthood anymore. After AD 70, they did. Samaritans say, we still know who our priests are. Now, are they of the tribe of Levi? No. But they still say they have it. So by the time of Jesus, in the first century, the Jews avoided social and religious contact with all Samaritans. In fact, they would walk days around Samaria rather than walk through it on the main road. So this is why when Jesus told stories that crossed the boundaries between Samaritans and Jews, it was so shocking. What other story crosses the line? We got this one of him sitting at the well. It's not a story. This is a true event. But what stories does he have that cross the line?
Good Samaritan.
Good Samaritan, right. And the Jews hate that story. Why? Because the Samaritan's good and the Jews are bad. So they hate that. Jesus is saying anybody has a capacity to be good if they will. So that's where we're at with that. So what did Jesus mean when he said he would give her living water?
Something more than physical.
Something more than physical. Okay? It says the water he gives becomes a spring inside the person welling up. What does that mean, that it wells up inside the person? During the intertestamental period of the Old Testament and the New, during one of the sieges of Jerusalem, they were afraid they would run out of water. Now, the temple is set on top of a hill. Water doesn't typically go uphill. But God came in and did a miracle and saved them, and that miracle exists even today. When they prayed for help, there was a small well on top of the hill. It exploded into a geyser of water, and to this day it has high pressure at the top of this mountain still. And so, that's when Jesus talks about water gushing, maybe that was on his mind, as he's telling the story. But in the wider New Testament, we understand it to be salvation, the ability, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, all those things. So how does Jesus give it? We're not at a time where baptism is happening because he's not been resurrected. How is Jesus offering her living water?
Well, he offers her living water welling up to eternal life.
But how's she supposed to take that water?
Faith.
Yes, at this point, all she has to do is have faith in Jesus to be saved. That's all it requires. That's all he's asking her to do is believe in me. Now, believing in me means you'll change, you'll do things differently. The woman caught in the act of adultery, what did he say? Change. He said, I'm not asking for any more commitment than to change your life, be better. So she gets the water. It would involve telling her everything he knows about it. It's a little uncomfortable with it. So, I've been praying about it, and I've been writing down everything that I've all done, and then start telling it Sunday. We'd be really uncomfortable if somebody had the ability to know everything we thought or did. I don't want that, but that's what Jesus does, and she lets him do it. Because no one knows the secret but her and the other women in town that they're gossiping about it. So, anyway. But he says you'll never thirst again because you'll have this inner fountain. Your faith thirst will be taken care of. So her transformation from isolated and ashamed is a public witness to town. Now she goes forth and she's the person leading them all to Christ. Did it last? No. Because they still believe they're worshiping on Mount Gerizim. But that's where we are. So, what can you conclude about this woman from Jesus' statements about this woman's character?
Bit of a harlot.
Okay? Does Jesus go ahead, Mark.
Well, it seems like she went from shame to joy.
Excitement, yeah, she runs to the town. Why does Jesus... go ahead, Karen.
She was the men of the town came out, which is amazing that they would listen to her.
Yeah.
She was of social low standing, and they at least wanted to know what was going on.
Ben, anything happen?
I think it's a lesson to us that from the outside, she seemed like there's no reason for Jesus to talk to her. The decisions that she's making in her life, how she's living, all that. But we can't be so quick to write people off because, like her, opportunity to do better. So sometimes they're just looking for that spark or that help that they need to make the right choices and change their life.
I think that we can see that Christ saw that she had the ability to change her life. And many times we look at people and say they're never going to change. And that's us making assumptions that we shouldn't probably make.
You know, who has a better chance of stopping drinking? The alcoholic who hides it from everybody, or the alcoholic who says, I've confronted who I am, what I am, and I'm going to be stronger because of that? Which one?
The one that admits he has a problem.
One that admits it. Well, who has a better chance of getting to heaven? A Christian that tries to make everybody think they're a perfect Christian, or the one that says, I'm not perfect?
The one I'm not perfect.
No one wants to listen to the one who claims they're perfect, do they? Because even if you are, we all assume what? You're lying.
Hypocrite.
You're a hypocrite, yeah. But also, even if you are perfect, then you don't relate to me. So sorry, I'm going to talk to people that can relate to me. You know, and that's the thing. Jesus says, I can relate to you because I know you. And so if you'll admit who you are and have faith in me, we can get past this.
He wasn't willing to judge her either.
No. Do we ever see Jesus being really judgmental? Yeah, we're going to keep the tables in the temple a little bit, but that's not judgmental. He says, look what you're doing, that's wrong. You can't do that in God's house and kick the tables. But when he was meeting people, that's what made the Jews so mad. Jesus should have been arranging fancy dinners with the Sanhedrin, with the bigwigs. Instead, he goes to supper with a tax collector and sits and talks to a harlot, and he does all these things. His followers would have never passed the rabbi's school of acceptance. They were fishermen, they were tax collectors, they were all these things that everybody else said, they are not fit. I mean, look at Paul. Paul was a model student, right? Straight A's in school, which is amazing when you're a guy, because none of us get straight A's. It's always the girls. But straight A's in school. Paul knew the Old Testament inside and out. He was raised in a very strict family. And so he's the ideal candidate. But Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, no way. But he's the first one. They're the first ones he calls. Okay, I got to change the settings on this one to turn so quick.
That's true.
Anyway.
T-shirt.
Yeah, I bought that shirt for Fiona to wear at camp. I was at a Bible bookstore, and I got her one, I got Declan a different one, but I like that. Jesus thinks I'm to die for it, and that's true. As he looked at her, he was willing to die for that woman. If she would just say, I believe. Which she did say that. She ran off to get everyone to come listen. That pertains to all of us. That does. Go ahead.
I think that the Pharisee and the publican, Jesus could look at the heart. And he had that ability to understand where they were and what they could be. And I just think of that situation where, because it's not who you are, it's what you are. I guess is another way of saying it.
And so what's the lesson then for us? Don't ever write anybody off. Right? Look at who they could be. Look at who maybe they are, but some people put on this really hard exterior because they don't want to let you in. There's different reasons, but
Well, I was thinking, Craig and I are still fairly close, and when he first came here, I was able to strike up a conversation with him, but at one point, early years, he didn't have a Christian walk, I guess is about the best way of saying it. That was not any of his intentions, and yet, if you got to know him, he was a real advocate for the Lord.
we got a mixed bag in here today. We got people that grew up in the church, fell away, and came back. We got people that had really hard lives, and then they came to the Lord later in life. We have people that grew up like me. You grew up in a family of elders and preachers with generations of it, but you're still a sinner. I still messed up, and Probably if you went back to my hometown, there'd been a lot of them say, he shouldn't have lived with a preacher, I don't know what's wrong with it. And the elder too.
Jeff, but they said that
They
about
tried to hire me
Christ.
and I refused, so.
They said that about Christ. But
Yeah.
can anything come out of Nazareth, was it?
Yeah, anything could come out of that town. I got an email, by the way, this week, speaking of that. Some friends of mine, people we went to Greece with, they've had to cancel all their trips this year because it was all going to be in Israel, in the Middle East. So I'm glad we didn't put money down to go on that trip. But one of the things he said is the only Church of Christ still in Israel is in the city of Nazareth. And their preacher makes 90% of his income from tourists coming. You know, church groups coming, people coming to see it. And so now, nobody's coming. So they were asking if people wanted to help, send him some money and all. But he said he's not going to give up. He said that the war will end. We'll be back where we were. But anyway, so how did Jesus demonstrate his love? Well, we've got to discuss about that. He offered her the chance of salvation. He offered her living water. He offered her a second chance in life. So what was her reaction at the end of this? We don't know how long the encounter was, but it seemed like it was pretty short. What does she do, huh?
She leaves her water pot and goes to the city, and that which would have been a very important thing to her physically.
We don't realize it because we open a tap. But when you've been some places I have, and Haiti's a good example, the number one reason for a lack of ability to read, lack of education in third world countries is the time it takes to go to the well or to the river, draw water, and take it home. In places, in some of the places in Africa, it can take all day to get your water. So those kids never go to school. And so it's a never-ending cycle of ignorance and inability to make a better life. Haiti, same way. First job of the kids of the day is to go draw water, bring it home for the morning stuff. Then they go to school if they are allowed to go to school, if they have the money, because there's no free education. And then they go back and they do it again at night. So we don't realize that because it's so easy to just turn the tap on. But it's a lot. So for this woman to walk way out to get her water and to leave her water pot, you're right, it's a big deal. It's probably two pots because she would have carried it on the thing over her shoulders.
Well, even when he offered her living water, she says, well, give me this living water so I don't have to make this trek.
Yeah. Oh, good. Boy, that'd make life easier, wouldn't it? I never have to come again. Yeah. And that shows she was still at that point thinking about physical and not spiritual. Okay, so what does her action reflect about Jesus?
Went and told others about Jesus.
That he
When?
knew all about her.
When did she go tell him?
Immediately.
Immediately. Nothing, even leaving her pot behind, she ran to go tell everybody. What else does it tell you?
She had a heart that was open to godly principles.
When we get a promotion, what do? Tell everybody we know. When something bad's happening or something's great happening in our lives, we tell everybody we know. That's just the nature of friendships and humanity. We share it. I know my sister and my brother and I, even the weather, we share the weather every couple, with something like Snowgeddon this week and all that stuff, Memphis did the same thing we did. Memphis started out with really bad storms and then they had snowstorm. But it didn't leave much this time, but we tell that because it's interesting and we're comparing our lives. That's what Jesus is about. If you care enough to be a Christian, you should care enough to share with other people. We love sharing, so how about sharing the good news?
She shared it because the way it affected her life, she wanted to see that in everybody around her's life.
Yeah. I think something happened a while back. I'm trying to think how. I think it was like one of the restaurants in town was doing a free meal for veterans or whatever. And so I called the ones I knew, say, hey, go in gave you free meal for you and your family. This time it's better than usual. A lot of times it's just 10% off, but this was a free meal for the whole family. So, yeah. Bob did this to me, no. So, this woman could make the list. The discrimination, the hatred, the gender bias, all of these things. I have lost my connection. All right, hang on. Now I can't find another paper. My page went blank on the paper. No. All right, so all this stuff that's going on in your life, she's hated by the Jews, gender bias, all these things are going on. And when you add all those up, she's not the candidate we want. We do that when we're hiring somebody. We look, not necessarily the candidate we want. But he didn't put her in charge of the class. He's not saying, I'm going to trust my kids to you to be babysitter, or let me trust my best friend to hang out at your house because you're not going to hit on him. What he trusted her with was salvation. He said, this is me, and she ran to share it. Jesus did something in her life that was huge, and that was touch her. Just reach out. And we see that over and over again. Sometimes it wasn't physical, sometimes it was metaphorical, but the people that were screaming unclean because they had leprosy, Jesus touched them. The woman caught in the act of adultery, he knelt down on the ground with her. I used to wonder, why did he kneel down to write? And I've always wanted to know what he wrote. We don't care. But I think I figured this out. And that is, they threw her on the ground to stone her. So he got down to her level. She was on the ground, so he went down on the ground. And that was a metaphorical touch. I mean, he was down level with her. When everyone else who thought they were so much better were standing up here with rocks in their hands. He's on the ground with her. So over and over again, he's doing this thing. Zacchaeus, come down from there. Go into your house. He invited himself to this guy's house. So, in what way can we identify with the woman in this story?
Unworthy.
We're unworthy too?
Don't accept him.
I feel unworthy.
But Jesus thinks you're to die for him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And well, grateful.
I know I say it a lot, but I mean it. If no one else needed saving but me, Jesus would have died for me. It's that important. Yeah. So what does it reveal about God's attitudes towards sinful people? How does God see a sinful person?
All are important.
For whosoever will.
Huh?
For whosoever will.
Sometimes we kind of, by our behavior, act like the most important people are the ones that we're in church with. And that's not true. The most important ones are the next one we can bring to Christ. Not for me, not so we can get a running tally. So I've always, in my ministry life, which goes all the way back to when we were first married, really working with youth and stuff in the German church, but I determined early on, I said, if I'm going to preach, I don't want to be like my grandfather, my uncle, and my dad when they preached. I want to be different. And so I tried to do mine as I saw Jesus doing it, just talking to people, sharing stories, sharing life with them, and then I decided I was never going to restrict my love for those that are coming to church, that are paying my salary. It's about those who are outside. Ron?
I'd just like to make the point that I am personally amazed at how well she knows Jewish history and what is going to happen, what has happened, and she asked the right questions. And when he gives her the answer, she realizes that he's telling her the truth, that he's not just blowing her off, because She actually is very intelligent.
In fact, what's the first question she asks when she gets to town? Is, could he be the one?
Oh, yeah.
What does that tell you?
She knows that one is coming.
They all know he's coming. Now, the Jews typically say it can't be him. Why? He's from Nazareth, as Steve pointed out. Or, he doesn't look good enough to be. I mean, David was a handsome young guy when he was made king. This guy is rough looking, and even his looks fulfill prophecy, didn't it? He will be nothing to look at. But she says, could this be him?
Yeah.
When the Jews asked that question, they said no, because it's supposed to be Elisha.
Because
He can't
to
be one.
the Jews, he was from the wrong side of the tracks.
Yep.
That's a question you ask when you really do know the answer, and you're hoping somebody will validate what you're thinking. And it's really interesting the way he approaches her and how she approaches. It's amazing, really, the story is quite invigorating, really, and encouraging.
When I worked in and out of Russia in the old days, one of the things that kept me alive was that in Russia, you didn't speak to anybody on the streets because they were also afraid of their own government. And so I was able to blend in, right color, right hair, all that. But because you walk down the street just looking down, you didn't make eye contact, you didn't talk to anybody else, because that was the safest way to be. You didn't know your neighbors, you didn't talk to your neighbors, they might spy on you to get some advantage out of the government. And that was my whole protection, was head down, eyes on the ground, and don't speak to anybody. That's the typical response, and the Samaritans are so used to Jews doing that to them, that's why it was so shocking that a Jew looked at her in the face. She was going to totally ignore him, just get her water and leave. Because she assumed he was going to ignore her. And yet he did. And that's your biggest takeaway tonight, is just don't ignore people. Try to meet them where they're at. Try to be understanding. You don't have to agree with everything about them. I've got a person I've been working with for a long time that I keep telling them, I don't have to agree with you. I still love you. I don't have to agree with you. And a question came up one time, so you saying I'm going to hell? I'm not saying anything. But I think if you compare it to the book, you might be in a spot of trouble right now. And I'm not saying anything. I don't have the ability to say who here gets to go to heaven and who doesn't, and I'm not even going to try. And I'm just hoping I get there. All right, Morgan, that's it.
Her first reaction was shock.
Was what?
Shock.
Yeah.
Why you being a Jew are you talking? That's how people see it today.
Well, I would.
Yeah.
In public.
All right, we're going to stop there while you go and say, the children's get in here.
Go over, Karen. Just get ugly.
Thank you all.
Get ugly. All right. It was an intentional. How you doing, my friend? Are you? Good.
I am not in pain, so you take it. Just take it, that's fine.
That's a good thing. No pain is a good thing.
Yeah.
One day at a time. One thing at a time.
I've seen the guy.
You got this. And besides, we got cups starting.
I got it.